It's not because they're unhealthy. Never buying them again doesn't mean never eating them again, but rather, I won't buy them because they're actually ridiculously easy to make at home, which saves money and saves your body from questionable ingredients that always get added when things are made in a factory.
Do you struggle to stay consistent with healthy eating and just want food decisions to be easy, guilt-free, and sustainable? You're in the right place. Hi, I'm Chelsea, nutritionist and fitness coach who overcame restrictive yo-yo dieting and body image insecurities using simple nutrition tools, all backed by biblical principles. And now I help women like you find that same freedom with food so you can feel confident in the look and health of your body for decades to come. I'm ready to dive in with you. So grab that cute notebook you've been hanging on to and let's go.
Before we start the topic of today's episode, I want to share with you a brand new opportunity we are launching called Diet-Free Nutrition Coaching. For the first time ever, you can book a 1-hour coaching call with me where we dive into the biggest challenges that are keeping you from staying consistent with your healthy eating, and I will walk you through a step-by-step plan to conquer it. You'll basically have a personalized action plan with accountability in only an hour. You can head to coachrain.com/dietfree to book your call. But don't wait, I only have a select few spots available for this opportunity. Again, that's coachrain.com/dietfree for your 1-hour deep dive coaching call with yours truly. And now, welcome to the show. On today's episode, I'm going to share with you the 4 foods that I will never buy again and why you shouldn't either. However, it's not because they're unhealthy. Never buying them again doesn't mean never eating them again, but rather, I won't buy them because they're actually ridiculously easy to make at home, which saves money and saves your body from questionable ingredients that always get added when things are made in a factory. There are a lot of possibilities with this, but I decided to go through my top 4 because I truly believe these are the simplest to make that homemade switch with. Starting with number 1, pickles. And really anything pickled. Yes, your standard pickled cucumbers, but also onions, beets, radishes, cabbage, otherwise known as sauerkraut. Pickling and fermentation is one of mankind's first forms of processing food. It's one of our oldest forms of food preservation, especially before we had refrigeration. Even biblically speaking, we know vinegar was used since it was offered to Jesus as a cruel form of hydration while he was hanging on the cross. You can see Mark chapter 15, verse 36 for that reference. And the cool thing about pickling is that you can totally customize it. All you really need is vinegar. I typically use apple cider vinegar, but distilled white vinegar totally works as well. You'll need filtered water, salt, and then whatever you want to pickle. So the last time I bought a jar of pickles, I paid $9. And I only did that to, 1, get the ingredient label to recreate it myself because it was pretty much the only one that didn't have a bunch of extra garbage in it. And 2, to have the jar. But if you pick up your standard jar of pickles, you're likely going to see things like yellow and blue food dyes. Listen, if your pickles are vibrantly green, you can bet that they are a chemical storm. Natural pickles are more of a dull, pale brownish green, so be on the lookout for that. Your standard dill pickles only require vinegar, water, salt, and fresh dill sprigs. Usually you'll also add some pickling spices like whole peppercorns and mustard seeds. Or if you like sweet pickles, a pinch of coconut sugar will do the trick. In fact, when I pickle beets, I use the juice and zest from an orange to sweeten it, and it works like a charm. The possibilities are endless here. Garlic cloves, cardamom seeds, cinnamon, bay leaves. It's like a science experiment. Plus, on a molecular level, pickling changes the nutritional properties of food and can often be easier to digest. Plus, it's helpful for your gut microbiome. Have I convinced you to make your own pickles yet? Okay, the next food I will never buy again is popcorn. At least not microwave or already popped popcorn. In case you didn't know, making your own popcorn is honestly pennies on the dollar, and you have full control over the oil used. All you need is half a cup of popcorn kernels. I prefer to find the non-GMO kind, 2 to 3 tablespoons of your favorite cooking oil, for which I typically use grass-fed butter or coconut oil, and a large pot with a lid over a hot burner. No bag in the microwave, no fancy popping machine, although those are kind of fun. Just an old-fashioned stovetop. And this is how it works. Get your oil nice and hot in the pot before adding your kernels. I actually like to add 3 test kernels and wait for those to pop before adding the rest. But then once you do pour in the kernels, toss them around and coat them with the oil. And just keep doing that occasionally to prevent burning. No one likes burnt popcorn. And it really only takes a couple of minutes for the popping to start. And then once it takes longer than, say, 4 seconds between pops, they're done. Of course, just like any other popcorn you might buy from the store, add your favorite flavorings. Except with this method, you have ingredient quality control. Some of my favorites are nutritional yeast for a cheesy flavor, which actually has a lot of protein in it. Sometimes I'll do a cinnamon with a touch of coconut sugar for a dessert churro vibe. Heck, I have even used my own ranch seasoning that I make with onion powder and dried dill, which I have to say, don't knock it until you try it. So about 1 tablespoon of oil per 1/4 cup of kernels will do the trick. And it's worth noting that half a cup of kernels will fill the equivalent of a large movie theater bucket. For a bonus pro tip here, check out your natural grocery store in the bulk foods department. A lot of times they will actually have a bin of popcorn kernels that you can just scoop out and pay by weight. And that really is the least expensive way to get popcorn. All right, the third food I will never buy again is bread. And when I say never, I really mean just your standard loaf of bread for things like sandwiches or toast. I can definitely see myself buying a fancy artisan loaf with some unusual flavorings in it. But for regular use, it is homemade for me and my household. Now, stick with me here. I know sourdough has made a strong comeback thanks to COVID. And along with it, about a bajillion people online trying to teach you how to make it. Speaking as someone who also makes her own sourdough, I know how overwhelming it is to look up directions online. It seems like everyone and her sister has their own method, which is because there are infinite variables you can use to make a loaf of sourdough. And that should actually be a comfort to you, because that means sourdough is pretty resilient, and a little mess up does not necessarily mean the whole thing is ruined, unlike most baking. So I prefer sourdough because it uses a long fermentation process. And all that means is there's a longer time for the gluten to break down, making it easier on our digestive system. The sheer amount of bread-based foods in the standard American diet has led to an uprising in gluten intolerance and celiac disease, which was basically unheard of a century ago. Sourdough seems to minimize the contributions to those, but this ultimately is a personal choice. If you experience side effects from eating glutinous foods, you may want to stick with sourdough. But if not, yeasted bread is referenced in the Bible all over the place. It's sometimes called leavened bread. Jesus himself ate bread with yeast. Not exclusively, he definitely followed Jewish practices of eating unleavened bread in several circumstances. But yeast is not on the list of unclean foods mapped out in Leviticus. Plus, the yeast we use in baking today is pretty much the same as it was back then. So don't fret about the overall health of that component. All that being said, Making bread at home with yeast instead of sourdough starter is just as easy and takes less time. Please hear me when I say this. All that is needed to make a loaf of bread is flour, water, salt, and if you want it fluffy, some kind of rising agent, be it yeast or the natural bacteria of an active sourdough starter. That's it. I dare you to find a loaf of bread in the grocery store with nothing more than those 4 ingredients. Now, for both yeasted and sourdough bread, the method is roughly the same with only slight differences in the timing. For both, you need to mix the rising agent with water, then mix that with flour and salt until it's all incorporated. With sourdough, a series of stretch and folds at regular intervals are how the gluten is formed to make a cohesive loaf, while yeast acts much more quickly, so kneading the dough quickly is the next step with that loaf. They both need to be shaped and left to proof before baking, which simply means giving it time to rest and rise. And then bake. Yeasted loaves can be prepped and baked in a single day, no problem, while sourdough usually takes a day in advance for planning, depending on how long you want to ferment your dough, how active your starter is, and those details. But honestly, a high-quality loaf of bread without a bunch of unnecessary ingredients from the store costs about the same as a bag of flour, which makes me around 5 loaves. And I get the bougie flour that is all organic, non-GMO, sprouted, ancient grains, raised without glyphosate, because I'm just not quite at the point where I can full-on homestead and grind my own wheat into flour. That is the goal. But even so, it's quite a cost savings. Plus, nothing beats freshly baked bread, in my humble opinion. And the final food I will never buy from the store again are crackers. Now, for me and my recipe, this is contingent on having discard from a sourdough starter, which you can totally make and maintain without ever baking a loaf of sourdough. It's literally just flour and water. You could also ask one of your sourdough friends for some starter and then have them teach you how to feed it. Either way, it is the perfect batter for homemade crackers in 8 minutes. In fact, I make Cheez-Its for my husband using my sourdough starter, and every time I do, I have to make a double batch and hide the second one because he will literally stand over the stove and eat an entire baking sheet once they're mostly cooled. All you need for crackers is roughly half a cup of non-active sourdough starter, whatever seasonings you like. We're thinking salt, I've used rosemary, everything but the bagel seasoning, whatever your heart desires. And a tablespoon of cooking oil of choice. I like grass-fed butter in my crackers. You'll mix the starter and the oil to combine thoroughly and then spread it very thinly over a baking sheet lined with parchment paper. Add your seasoning and bake at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 4 minutes. Take them out and score them into squares if you want them to be uniform. You can always just bake it into one big thing and crack off pieces. But especially when I'm making Cheez-Its, I kind of like them to be perfect squares. So I use a pizza cutter for this. And then return them to the oven for another 4 to 5 minutes until the edges turn golden brown. This one is totally husband approved, and I know from my nutrition coaching clients that they are also child approved. The best part, it costs pennies to make. A box of crackers that doesn't have seed oils or other garbage in it, I've only ever been able to find one in my grocery trips, and it costs $6 for like 12 crackers. That's absurd. I can make an entire baking sheet for, honestly, on the high end, probably 10 cents. They're totally customizable, so the kids or husband can help make their own creation too. All right, let's recap. The top 4 foods I will never buy from the store again because I discovered just how easy they are to make at home, saving you money and questionable ingredients, are pickles, popcorn, bread, and crackers. My challenge for you this week is to practice making just one of these yourself. Send me an email with a picture that would legitimately make my day. But I want you to see that you are totally capable of making the real deal yourself. And if you want some help in getting started with these, or could use some help with planning entire meals that are healthy, easy to put together, and actually taste good, I am now offering one-on-one coaching calls. That's right. You can now book a 1-hour strategy call with me, and I will walk you through solving your biggest obstacle when it comes to staying consistent so that you can eat with confidence and fuel the best version of you possible. Simply head to coachrain.com/dietfree to snag your session today. But I only have a limited number of spots available, so don't wait. Again, that's coachrain.com/dietfree for your 1-hour coaching call with me. I pray this episode was helpful to you, my friend. If so, could you do me a massive favor and take 30 seconds to write a review? This is the best way to bless me big and help more people learn just how simple eating healthy consistently can be. And if you want more value-packed info from me, head to coachrain.com and sign up for the Weekly Harvest, my weekly emails filled with recipes, how to use food as medicine, biblical nutrition, and more. That's coachreign.com for the Weekly Harvest. Blessings until next time, sis. Toodles.